All right, we are live.
Here we go. Here we go, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi. Welcome to all of our fellow Homo sapiens in the live chat. With me is we are co-hosts. My co-host Armin Navabi, who is well groomed. He seems to have given himself a really good. Did you give yourself the haircut, or did someone give it to you?
No, somebody.
Somebody. Okay, unnamed. So yeah, Armin's looking really good. He's looking clean shaven. He's looking very attractive. Whereas, well, me, I'm just me. Me. So anyway, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? All right. Speaking of me being me, here we go. This is the topic. So we have stumbled into this thing many times in previous episodes, and we've decided, no, it's okay. That's a separate topic. We're going to talk about it in a separate episode. And this is that separate episode. So liberal versus woke. Who's going to endure? So we know that there is a little bit of a cleft among liberals of late, right? There are the mainstream sort of conventional liberals, and there are the new sort of the woke far left types. And there is a continuing battle happening, right? And recently, some of the mainstream liberals have started pushing back on it, right? There was the Harper's letter, which many of you know about, signed by everybody from Noam Chomsky, Margaret Atwood, Salman Rushdie, JK Rowling, Malcolm Gladwell, our own Sarah Haider. And these liberals are now fighting back against these tactics of the woke far left, right? And so here's the thing. Many of them are aligned when it comes to principles, civil liberties and all of those other great issues. But when it comes to tactics, they have problems with it. So when it comes to atheists and secularists, this is something that we've been talking about. Armin, you and I have been discussing this for a very long time, as many other ex-Muslims have, that this sort of leftist, the sort of far left or regressive left thing that Majid Lawaz has talked about, we've talked about, many other ex-Muslims have been talking about for, a good 6 to 7 years now. Now it's kind of come up and affected the mainstream. So I wanted to ask you first, right? What do you think? How big a danger is this woke left, and especially put in perspective with what's happening on the other side, the far right, which is an entirely other problem?
Well, I'm gonna try to play the devil's advocate today. Because again, we got some comments today by some of our patrons to make sure that like this episode is balanced. So I'm going to take the other side, and so if I want to take their position, I'm going to say that first of all, I don't accept your description as woke left. This is just like a way for you to dismiss some real activism that is happening here. And if you're asking how dangerous these people are, I'm going to take the position how dangerous we are. Well, we're very dangerous, and you guys are afraid. The mainstream liberal elite people that are noticing that they're not the gatekeepers of what is acceptable narrative. They're just noticing a bit pushback by people that have always been silenced, that they'd never had the voice, by women that are pushing against misogyny, by people of color that are pushing back against bigotry, by trans people that are pushing back against transphobia, by gay people that are pushing back against homophobia. They finally have a voice, and the mainstream liberals, they wanted to pretend that they are, that they're on the side of the dissent, but they are not that much different from the Republicans and right-wing people. They are in their interests aligned with keeping a system that kind of creates the imagery or like the illusion that dissent is allowed, but dissent is only allowed in a framework where their authority and their position is not being challenged, right? So you create an illusion of dissent, but once that dissent goes a bit farther than what they are comfortable with, and once it gets out of their control and their authority and their position is being threatened, then they feel they need to push back. And they used to be able to push back a lot more effectively because they controlled all the medium in which all of these messages, all of these narrative was being were given a voice to. And which is interesting, because Noam Chomsky signed that letter that you mentioned, but he was the person that wrote the book Manufactured Consent, describing all of this. So now when there's a pushback, when there's like a crack in the system, and these people seem to not be able to control exactly where all these narratives, how all these narratives are taking shape, now, and they writing a letter complaining about cancel culture, which is so pathetic and ironic, given that it was these gatekeepers, these few elite people that are now finally getting a taste of their own medicine. Finally, some people are pushing back against narrative. They were the people that were canceling people all the time. They had the people with the firing and hiring power, with the investing power in all the narratives that kept their authority in control, and their power and their control intact. Now they're noticing that they're whining about cancel culture. What they describe as cancel culture is just people speaking back, people that never had a voice now speaking back. They're calling it cancel culture. They were in charge of the cancellation. They were always in charge of a cancellation of whoever stepped out of line, and now they're whining about people speaking back.
Okay, so now after you've said all that, I have to admit that you don't look as good, and I look way better than you do.
Okay.
Suddenly I became the good-looking one over here.
Right.
So here's my response to that. It's one of the ways that the woke thing fits is that it's like you guys. I'm speaking to you as the woke person. You just woke up, right? As if the mainstream liberals for decades now, right, and a century when it comes to women's rights, as if they have never spoken against misogyny. They've never been talking about sexism. The civil rights movement never happened. They never actually passed the Civil Rights Act. They have never been allies before. They have never had the Stonewall riots and the gay rights movement and moving towards it. And yes, it took time and it was incremental, but there are ways anybody can come up and shout out a good idea. Yeah, I want free college. I want to build a wall. I want to free this. I want free this. I want free that. That's great. But you're not living in a benevolent democracy. You're a dictatorship. You're not living a socialist dictatorship. You're living in a democracy where about half of the government that you have to get consent from to pass any kind of legislation is going to be deadly against you. What are you going to do? How are you going to get those ideas through? Right? The mainstream liberals, people like, and this includes by mainstream liberals, now I'm saying Noam Chomsky, even though he used to be considered far left once upon a time. But these are people who got these things through, who wrote about it, who talked about it, who were activists, and they actually got something done. It is so easy today to come out and say, I'm for gay rights. Because you know why? Because if you say that you're against gay rights, then you're going to be outcast. That's not how it was for the people who actually said it in the 60s. When people thought it was like this abomination, and the majority of people, including liberals, thought that it was a sexual deviancy. At that time, they were people, right? And that includes conservatives like Andrew Sullivan too. But these are the people who said it when it was really hard to say it, right? When they were demonized for saying it. Those are the people who fought for these rights. They're demonized, and they got things done. They got things passed. They got legislation through, right? This is not just a matter of going out and screaming and everything. Yes, it starts with protests, but it did not happen by silencing dissent. It happened by working with the opposition, not by compromising, not by capitulating, but by negotiating, hard negotiations and incremental processes that actually got this shit through. Right? That is the legacy of a lot of these mainstream liberals who are speaking out against it, right? And it's not the legacy. It's not just about a bunch of screaming and going out and silencing people and using hashtags to silence them from their living rooms. I mean, And again, the scale of this is, how many Americans are on Twitter? According to Pew, 22%. And most of them aren't even actively engaged.
Okay, so it's so funny you mentioned civil rights movement. That was the civil rights movement, and all the examples that you mentioned that are exactly my point. Those are not mainstream when they happened. It was our people who forced the mainstream, so-called mainstream liberals, the gatekeeper elitists. We charged at the gates that they were keeping, and we pushed through, and we made them mainstream. The dissent, the mainstream, and the people. First of all, they're all the same. The mainstream liberals and the mainstream conservative, they're all the same. They just that the mainstream liberals are just there to create an illusion of dissent, but that's the dissent that they seem to be tolerating is just a controlled form of dissent. Any changes that happen, like if you look at civil rights movement, do you think those people were popular towards mainstream liberal at the time? No, only when the so-called mainstream liberals were defeated, were crushed because of the voices of people could not be ignored. Only after that they became part of the mainstream. So if you're asking how dangerous we are right now, if you think this is not even, we haven't even begun to push back against you. Yes, what you consider woke far left narrative, this is your mainstream tomorrow. Just like the civil rights movement activists, which they were considered as radicals, and now they're forced to be accepted as mainstream. Today's what you call radicals or woke, they are going to be tomorrow's mainstream. So you want to be afraid? Yes, be very afraid.
Right.
So when you mention about democracy, again, it's very ironic because Noam Chomsky, who signed the letter, mentioned in his book Manufactured Consent that the democracy that you're experiencing is a fake democracy, because yes, people have a choice to vote, but with the people in power controlling all the narratives, all the stories, and all the information that people are exposed to, then you create an illusion where people are choosing what they want to get, but under a heavy level of brainwashing, right? So the only way that you could get true democracy is not to just give people the vote, but also give people the ability to access correct information, right? Not just freedom, not just a freedom of speech, but also the right for people to have the access to the correct information. And for a true democracy to happen, what you call woke are the people that are breaking the barriers, and actually the voices of the masses are finally being heard, and we're pushing through, and reaching out to people, and we're making real differences. And that's when you get true the democracy that was promised, right? Rather than this fake democracy that this mainstream liberals are advocating for, right? So when you mention silencing dissent, this is so ridiculous. This is not silencing dissent. Freedom of speech never meant freedom from consequences, right? Freedom of speech doesn't mean that people don't get to call you out on your homophobia, on your transphobia, on your racism. Freedom of, silencing dissent was happening when both sides, like the Democrats and Republicans, were in agreement on what kind of, who among the political elite get to say, who get to talk, and who doesn't get to talk, who gets to be funded for as a news organization, and who doesn't. Like, you think like you think all the revolutionaries. Here's the thing: the civil rights movement and all the women's rights and everything else happened with these people not having the funding or the resources that the political elite had when it comes to news agencies, newspaper, and they still manage to get their voice through. Imagine that. This is why you guys are afraid, because now it's even a lot more easier. And if the civil rights movement happened with the limited resources that they had, imagine what you call the woke is going to achieve with all the cracks that we're making compared to before, right? The silencing of dissent was happening when you stepped out of line. The people in all these in academia and in news organization and in politics got to fire you because you were stepping out of line. That if you weren't acting within a certain framework, then you wouldn't have even gotten the funding for your newspaper or for your news organization, or for running as congressman or senator. Like if you step out of line, you wouldn't be able to get the funding. Now we're actually, our agenda and our voices is making it into your politics. We have, it's making it into it's through social media, is reaching the people. Even with social media, that is now becoming our major weapon. Even it backfired on them, because they thought this is another media that they get to control and create a false sense of choice. We had the blue check marks, the algorithm, recommending the mainstream news outlets, but with all the manipulation that they try to make to just make sure that the mainstream is in power and that's the voice that is getting out there, we have managed to use that tool and turn it back on them, and we are slowly growing. And once we get the way that works is that if once we get to take the control of culture away from you, this is going to be like a flood that is going to take over everything, because these are voices that have been trying to get some form of audience for decades, and finally the barriers are falling apart. And once that barrier falls apart completely, you have no idea the changes that we have planned. This is not something that you could turn back. This is not something temporary.
Mm-hmm. I actually agree with the devil in some of these cases.
Oh, okay.
I like that. Was that totally devil's advocate, or do you actually believe in some of those things you were saying?
Well, I mean, there's always a little bit of truth mixed with.
Yeah, a little bit of truth. So I believe in that. I think that there is some correction due. I don't think that what you're talking about in terms of the whole, being the woke, the causes that you're talking about, the principles that you're talking about, the history of censorship that has come with the mainstream. And you're right that the radicals of today become the mainstream of tomorrow, and the radicals of yesterday became the mainstream of today, right? I just don't think that it happened by piling on people, getting them fired from their jobs, falsely accusing them, or spreading, using the definitions of word like racist and bigot, and spreading them so wide that even your own potential allies fall in it. You had to make some imperfect friends. Martin Luther King Jr. did that, right? You had someone like Malcolm X who was very militant, right? But people like Martin Luther King, who actually ended up making these changes, he didn't do them by crushing the opposition and crushing the system. He did it by working within the system and then crushing the opposition, crushing in a very different way. Not like firing them from their jobs or casting false aspersions against them. But that is the only part of it. That's the only part. Again, I said, when it comes to the woke crew, when it comes to the social justice crew, when it comes to their principles, I don't think there's any difference between the principles and what the woke people want to achieve and what most liberals want to achieve. The vast majority of us, right? But
the liberals want to use people's demand for desire for change as a way to just signal to them that they're on their side. But once they are in power, the mainstream liberals have never been a source of change. They're only being forced to change when they've been forced to change. They've been forced to change. And when you say, like, when you're talking about oh my God, working with the system. We are working with the system. We're replacing your politicians with our politicians. We're replacing your news anchors with our news anchors. We're replacing your activists, your fake activists, with our activists. We are working with this within the system. If you think that people saying racist, bigoted, and transphobic, homophobic stuff and losing their job because of it is by any means anti-free speech, or by any means not working with the system, then you're delusional. That's just people. What do you expect? Do we have to tolerate people that are that are just spreading hate? This is just consequences to horrible ideas. Like even in this letter, it's very interesting because the people that are pushing back against cancellation, like they themselves decided for like somebody like Greenwald, right? Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah.
Glenn Greenwald. He was supposed to sign that letter, but they decided that they don't like him and he's too controversial. So even in the process of fighting against, like they can't even help. These are the actual people with the authority of canceling, and what they don't like is not. It's not that they don't like cancel culture. It's not that they don't like people being canceled. What they want is that they want them to have the authority. They want them to be in control of who gets canceled. Right?
Yeah.
The people who signed this letter, they are completely in favor of cancellation. They're just worried that they're losing the power. Okay, and look at who signed this letter. People like JK Rowling, who's spreading transphobia. People that got stepped down from their job because of pushing for an authoritarian government, sending the military against protesters, and people speaking back against that. And now the editor stepping down. They're like, oh wow, who cancel culture. Really? You think somebody who's pushing for that kind of narrative should be in charge of such a major newspaper? Like, of course that person should be losing their job.
So here's the thing, and I want to ask you. So I want to ask you this seriously. Do you think that there are elements, like what you're saying about elements of cancel culture? They've always been around in the sense that you had these media corporations, and I remember when I was growing up in the 80s, before the internet, you got one side of the news cycle. You didn't really get any of the videos out of, say, Gaza or Iran that you see now, right? You basically just got what people wanted you to see, and they basically decided it, and they decided it for you. So this always happened. It was also true in the 80s that, for instance, if you went and you said something racist, or you used like a racist slur, or something like that, and you were a teacher at a school. There was this case that actually Yasmin Mohammed sent to me of a teacher in Victoria. I think it was Victoria. It was a private school or something. And he had said, he was an ex-Muslim, right? He's an Afghan from Afghanistan, grew up in a place where the Taliban had like oppressed women and so on. And he saw something about FGM. And he wrote, like, he said something like, fuck Islam, and, fuck this, and fuck FGM and so on. And so he said these things. And in some group on Facebook, apparently his students found out. It became public knowledge, and the school said, sorry, we got to let you go. That would have happened also in the 1980s, right? That kind of thing would have happened if someone got found out. The only thing is that the forums where people are posting these things are just much more transparent, okay? And the problem is, when you're running a school, when you're running a company, it's not a matter of free speech. It's a matter of, they can fire anybody who they don't feel is consistent with the standards of their company. So that's one thing, right? Now, when you talk about JK, so that was there before, that is there now, and I think it's actually justified. I don't like it. I wish everybody could say everything they want to all the time, but that is justified. But when it comes to something like what JK Rowling was going on about, and you're saying that she's transphobic, JK Rowling was coming out in support of a friend of hers who was fired for saying that biological sex is real. That was the root of the whole JK Rowling affair. So there was
That's not the only thing she said. That's not the only thing she said.
She said a whole bunch of things, but she was saying that biological sex is real. That is where it started. Okay.
Yep. But then she went on to say a whole bunch of other things that were completely that were transphobic. Well, I don't have it in front of me, but if you actually look at her tweets and her history, she's she didn't just go like, "Oh, biological sex is real." Oh, fired. It wasn't like that. So this is what people.
It was like that's exactly what it was like.
No. Actually, go look at the tweets that she liked and
I did. I followed it. I read her whole essay.
No, it's not just her essay. Like the things that she likes and retweets are completely transphobic. JK Rowling herself keeps acting like she keeps that acting.
I need an example.
Well, I don't have it in front of me, so
that is so woke of you.
Well, that's what you do as well. Well, okay. We could come back to this. We could have a separate discussion on this on how when we're more prepared on what exactly happened. Because neither of us, I think, right now has the full picture already in front of them, right? So I'm not saying anybody should believe what I'm saying, but we could go back into that. But J.K. Rowling herself, she keeps on saying, well, I don't have any issues with transgender people, but, and it always comes this but after, right? And she's like, biological sex is real. And I mean, it's very interesting because most people who are fighting for trans rights, they're talking about gender. They're not talking about biological sex. They're like this is transgender. That is a main discussion. But then she acts like she's the champion of science and truth telling by going and fighting this imaginary fight against these arguments that not very many people are making. But she uses it as a way to actually, if you actually read her article, she keeps using gender and sex interchangeably a couple of times in her article. So she's describing biological sex is real, but she is using that as a way to push back against transgender activism, right? I mean, I could go through her TERF manifesto that she posted line by line with you and show you how ridiculous it is to make
TERF manifesto. What is that?
Well, I mean, her
trans exclusionary radical feminist thing.
Yeah, I mean, people are considering her post in defense of her position to be the TERF's manifesto. But anyways, we could go. Do you want to go through? Do you want to go through a letter line by line, and I could tell you how transphobic?
It's a very long letter, but give me like one or two things that she said. And
well, I mean, again, this is.
I know I didn't agree with everything that she wrote in the letter as well because it was a very long letter, but I just don't think that it's incompatible with support for trans rights. I just don't.
No, okay. So she basically keeps condemning the trans rights activists for arguments that they're not making. She also keeps she goes against she keeps using sex and gender interchangeably, which is very interesting because it seems like she doesn't even understand what she's fighting against.
Give me an example.
I don't have the whole article memorized.
Okay.
We could do another show on this, and I could give you every single line of how she.
It'll be too narrow, but okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I think so. My view of that was this: that I think that there is. I don't. So when she said, and here I'll just explain it as easily as I can. When she said that. Biological, so we might actually agree on this. When she said biological sex is real, and when Daniel Radcliffe said that trans women are women, I don't think those two things are contradictory. So I think that there are natal, that's Natal, natal males and females determined by gamete size and karyotype, potentially, if you take a combination of both. That birth sex, you have one thing, that is obviously real. And people who are transgender dysphoria has always been real. Okay, so you have man and woman, you can identify as whatever gender you want to, and I'm going to believe you, I'm going to use your pronouns, and I'll support you in whatever you want to do. Right? When it comes to the actual natal sex, you wouldn't need terms like cis and trans if biological sex wasn't real. You wouldn't need hormones or any kind of surgery or anything like that to transition. You wouldn't need
where is her article? Can you actually send it to me? I'll try to find some.
Okay. JK Rowling. Okay, anyway, so
if I knew that we were going to discuss this, I would have so much stuff ready for you right here to show you how.
I mean, we don't have to go into it in a lot of detail.
She keeps telling she doesn't see, like, if you actually carefully read what she's saying, she doesn't think trans women are women. Okay, she doesn't think trans men are men. Okay, and I could read it for you. Like, she thinks like, oh yeah, we should accept them. Nobody should be mean to them. Okay, but she says biological sex is real, and then she uses that as an excuse to say trans women are not women. Okay, and if you actually read what she's saying, that's what she's suggesting. So she doesn't understand that biological sex being a real thing, that doesn't say anything about people's gender identity. That's what she doesn't understand. And she's only being treated as this expert, apparently. Like, why are we even listening to her on trans issues? Like, why? She wrote like a book. She wrote a fantasy book about witchcraft and wizardry, and now she's like the leading figure that people need to listen to. About, like, maybe step aside and know when to speak. Like, you are not like an expert in anything that you're leading on. Like, what the hell? Like, what? Again, these are people that this is
the devil's advocate speaking, right? That's not you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, hold on. Yeah, of course. This is why you guys are scared of us, so-called woke people, right? Because people who are these elitist people that are not used to, they thought like, whoa, look at me, I'm so important, I'm going to say things and people should treat me as authority in any topic. And people are now pushing back, and people like, oh my God, how dare they? Why? Who are these unwashed masses of people who are speaking us against us educated people? Like, these people want to just get together and congratulate each other about how smart they are, and feel like they're important, and now that they have like the people actually speaking back against them, they're just like, what the fuck is happening? They can't, like, why are not people taking seriously? I'm important and people should listen to me, and that's what's happening. And they just can't and it's very interesting because they get together and they're like, let's like write a letter together again to say why people shouldn't speak back against us. And they're like, oh, we showed them, and they're like, oh my God, look at this. They're just jerking off each other over this letter about how important they are, and how how uncalled it is for other people who are less than them to call them out on their bullshit. That's what's happening.
I sent it to you, the private chat. You can take a look at the link for the letter if you want to go to it. So I wanted to get back to this idea of cancel culture. So as I said, it's always existed. And a lot of times
that's not the letter.
That is a letter. A letter on.
That's talking about the letter.
No. It's a letter. Just go through it. Just click on the link. So so I think that cancel culture, all of that, when we talk about it, right, we're not talking about people who are being. This is not a free speech issue. So I want to make that clear. Like, I don't think that this is a free speech issue. People saying this is stifling free speech. That like the Trump people and a lot of they're saying that this is restricting our free speech. It's not restricting anybody's free speech. Alex Jones is still free to speak out as much as he wants to. Andrew Sullivan is going out. He himself said that he wasn't canceled. Barry Weiss wasn't canceled either. I mean, these were not people who were whose speech has in any way been restricted. In fact, today, now, and I'm saying this as a 45-year-old, I can tell you today, you are able to see the kinds of views in more places. You hear from more writers and more activists around the world and hear their views than any time ever before in history. You can hear race realists talk. You can hear neo-Nazis, get on a live stream on Gab and hear them talk about, their views. If any kind of thing that you want to listen to, you can find it and you can hear it. So I don't think that there's any kind of free speech, massive restriction going on legally or culturally or anything. But there is a problem. There's a problem of, for instance, this guy, is it Tim Cotton, or who's the guy, that senator who wrote about how the military should come into cities?
Yeah.
Tom Cotton. Yeah, the senator. And the New York Times, they fired their editor for running the op-ed.
Rightfully so.
Okay.
He didn't even read it. Did you know that?
Who didn't?
He didn't even read it. The editor. He admitted that he didn't even read it.
He's running. Okay, he should have read it. I agree.
Oh yeah, so he got. Oh, boo-hoo! An editor loses their job because of incompetence. Wow, tragedy, cancel culture.
Is that why he lost his job?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't. He wrote a letter. He published something that was so irresponsible, that was pushing for authoritarian.
Why was it irresponsible? Why was it irresponsible?
Getting the military to push back against protesters. Like, are you like pushing for an authoritarian regime, for a tyrant to get more?
He wasn't fired. He was made to resign. James Bennett. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, even better. Like, he wasn't even fired. He just stepped down. Wow, cancel culture. Boo hoo hoo. Like, are you guys fucking serious? This is from the people that never let any of the important voices get to anywhere mainstream, canceling everybody that was any form of real dissent. And now one guy steps down because of irresponsible behavior of pushing a complete a narrative pushed by a far right government that wants to become that is having dreams of tyranny, and publish it admitting without reading it, and somebody as irresponsible as that is stepping down. Oh no, cancel culture. Boo fucking who?
Is he if he had read it, right? If he had read it and he had run it, would you and your woke friends have supported the publication of the article?
Well, of course, I wouldn't, but it's interesting because this is the push for. It's funny because a lot of people call us fascists, and this is mainstream media outright advocating fascism, right? And they're being called out for it, and there's some slight pushback and a slight bit of a consequence to pushing for outright tyranny, and people are like, oh no, these Antifa people, or these woke people, they're the real fascists. Yeah, right.
No, so officially, I'll agree with you. I'm not a fan of sending the U.S. military in. I'm not, okay? But the New York Times has run columns from a lot of conservatives. Bill Kristol used to write there. Okay, there was what's his name? A lot of them still do. David Brooks writes there. Right, the Ross Douthat, like all of these people had columns there. This is a senator. He is an elected senator, United States senator, who's coming in and talking about a certain policy.
Oh, okay? A senator. See, this is what you guys do. Like, because it's senator. Like, these are the elite people that we should be taking seriously, even when they're pushing for fascism.
Do you know where the word elite comes from? It comes from, I don't know how to pronounce it, but éleger. That the etymology of it means elected. Okay, so the elite are like the high class people. It comes from that. He is an elected person who is voted in, right, by people in his state. He's an elected official, and he has a voice. He's saying it. The New York Times has run op-eds from dictators, right? There are people like Ahmadinejad, Columbia University, and when Ahmadinejad, you're the president of your ex-country or your country, actually, Iran. When he visited the UN, Columbia invited him to speak, and he came and he spoke, and he said a whole bunch of shit. He said, there's no homosexuals in Iran. That's when the whole thing happened. He did it. I mean, there was and I supported that. I think that that's good. That is a good thing. Now what's happening is there's editors who are being made to resign because they're running op-eds by, I am not a Tom Cotton fan. Okay, neither are most liberals, but neither is Noam Chomsky. But he signed that letter because he thought that it was a terrible thing.
So you're saying these people used to get what it used to be like is that when people spread bullshit that was in their best interest to maintain their position of authority, they didn't used to be that much of a pushback, and now there is. Okay, great. That's what I call progress.
No, there was a lot of pushback. When Ahmadinejad spoke at Columbia, there was a lot of pushback. But for the pushback to happen, you have to have something to push back against, right? You have to have the original event in the first place so you can have pushbacks, so you can have the conversation. If you don't have the original event, you know what's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen. Tom Cotton is going to write. He's going to go ahead. He's going to vote for it. He's going to drum up support behind closed doors. He's going to go ahead, and then they're going to send the military in.
Well,
and
this is the pushback.
There's going to be no discussion around it.
Ali, right? This is the pushback, because if these people weren't manufacturing consent when they were spreading when they had these people coming and writing op-ed, they wouldn't just irresponsibly putting it out there without the pushback. They would have somebody pushing back on every one of these points and then putting that out there, right, instead. But because these people are not putting the push, they're not letting the pushback to be part of the mainstream. This is what you're saying, like, oh, the original thing needs to be there for there to be the pushback. Well, guess what? We are the pushback. This is how it feels for you, for there to be a pushback. This is how it feels for there to be consequences for spreading fascism.
Everybody knows how it feels.
Yeah. So what are you complaining about? Cancel culture, cancel culture. This is just a pushback.
This whole thing, this again, you guys, and you're coming up and saying, well, now you know how it feels. It's not now they know how it feels. They've known how it feels for a long time, because what you guys are doing right now is something that these conservatives and the moral majority and the McCarthyism era, they have done before. They've done it before to liberals.
They have done it to other people. Now it's being done to them.
They have done it to liberals, and liberals have been on the receiving end of it from the right wing. You're talking about censorship of free speech. Censorship of free speech.
Liberals are the controlled opposition.
Hold on. Let me finish what I'm saying. He's talking about censorship at universities. Go to Christian universities. Okay, until 2000, the year 2000. Bush, the president George W. Bush, right? 43 went. He spoke at Bob Jones University. All the presidents used to speak there. They didn't even allow interracial dating until the year 2000, right? The Christian universities, they don't allow so many forms of speech. Nobody talks about them. The Republican presidents go and speak at them. Conservatives go and speak at them. Those are not the universities that they call out for having a super safe space against swearing, against interracial dating, against all these things. This kind of what you guys are doing is like, oh, now you know how it feels. Well, people who are liberals, who've actually gotten things done in the past, who have actually fought against these things and won throughout history, they know how it feels because they got it from the right wing, and now they're getting it from their own
bullshit.
left wing.
The people that bullshit.
Tactics.
Bullshit. The people that have done this in the past, they were getting it from both sides. They were getting it from both the Republicans and Democrats. They were getting it from both ends. They were getting it from both ends. So don't pretend that the liberal elite people were on the side.
That's not the point.
Let me. And also, don't tell me about the root word of what elite used to mean. We know what we mean when we use these words today. So, don't give me oh, this is what the original. Who gives a shit? We know what it means now. Okay, and also what we are doing is delegitimizing the institutional authority that you guys didn't used to have, and now it's being challenged. We're getting the unfiltered masses have an effect now more than ever. So. And every time we win, every time you guys are defeated through history, you want to revise history and pretend that the liberals were on our side from the beginning. They were never on our side. They were always pushing back against us. They were pretending. They only come and claim credit for the work of what we do after we defeat them. This is revising history. Right, and the thing that is scaring the most is that they're no longer immune. They used to have some level of control over what the masses get to see, and now they're losing even that control. And if they're going to keep losing it, and they're afraid of the consequences, they're losing control. That's what's happening.
Okay,
you had the privilege. They had the privilege of hiring and firing and investing and controlling the narrative. And again, this is what happens when people lose their privileges. When people lose their privileges, they go and cry out oppression. Oh my God, or what happened? We're being silenced. You're not being silenced. You're just losing the privilege of being the only voice in the room.
I agree with. And I'm fine with it. You don't want to, if you want to deplatform, you want to do like Twitter wants to ban Tommy Robinson, I don't agree with that. I wish that they wouldn't, because I find it very entertaining to have these people there. But They've done it. It works. And that is not anything new. That's not something that you guys came up with. That's been happening for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah,
okay?
From our side, from the people that were labeled as radicals, from the people that were considered unfit for civilized discussions.
Those people are Mendo.
Those are our people. No, they were never. No, the Democrats and Republicans at the time considered these people to be radicals.
Those were not people. Those people, when they went to law school, right? They weren't allowed to opt out of studying on assault and rape law because they might get triggered. They weren't exempted from studying those things. Okay, this has actually happened. They weren't like complaining about professors who were, English literature professors who had and getting them investigated because they were quoting something from literature that they found to be politically incorrect. Right? They weren't going and saying that, okay, we need to ban these books and take them off the shelves, or that we have to ban this part of history, that part of history, and take it off the shelves because, this is what conservatives do. In Texas, they want to get rid of the concept, the Republicans want to get rid of the concept of slavery from books. They want to not talk about slavery. They want to talk about, they want to totally whitewash the problems of the US that happened before. You guys want to do the same thing from the other side. That is not what the legacy of liberalism is.
That's bullshit. No. Our literature includes a lot of references to slavery. So you just go find
No.
Hold on. Let me answer. This is what you guys do. You always go find every movement has some
slavery. This is not about slavery.
Hold on. Let me say, you guys go and find. Every movement has some misfires here and there. There are some people that take it too far, and you guys, instead of looking at all the accomplishments and everything that we're pushing for, you go and find that one example here and there. In fact, you guys have a lot more examples of people calling out for outright fascism. But we call those out, and you guys ignore it. But every time there's one story here, one story there of somebody going a bit too far, and you guys use that as a way to paint our whole movement as ridiculous.
That's
right?
fair.
But, okay.
That's fair.
But okay.
If I'm using fringe examples of what you guys do, if these are fringe examples that if you're trying to say that. Yeah, this is not happening to the mass majority of conservatives, and it's not. Vast majority of professors and things like that. Then sure, right? I could be persuaded when it comes to that. But the reason that it's not happening,
you're acting like what we're doing is like the Salem witch trials, right? We're basically holding up a mirror towards these people and showing them how much. Outright fascism, bigotry, sexism, transphobia, and homophobia is out there, and people are like, "Oh my God, how dare you?" Here's the issue. Okay, we are fighting for our lives here, man. We are fighting for being able to live and have a say, have any level of control over our lives. And you guys are busy congratulating yourself over signing a letter that is complaining about why there is now a response to bigotry, a response to sexism. You can take that letter and you can shove it. You could take that letter and you can shove it up your ass, right?
There have been a lot of responses. The entire liberalism is about, and it has been way before you and even your parents had any pubic hair, right? Liberals have been providing a robust responses to bigotry, to sexism, and to homophobia. Hold on. You spoke. Okay? Don't try to cancel me right now.
Oh, see, this is what they call canceling.
You're doing it again.
Great job.
Okay, so yeah, you can have your safe space back in a little bit. Don't get too triggered. But this is what liberals have been doing this for decades. This bigotry, as if sexism and homophobia and all of these things just showed up when you guys won. Wokeness is a white privilege. It's a privilege of basically young white people, generally. That is why the people who vote for your candidates tend to be really sort of young, idealistic white people who feel like they are the first ones ever in history to ever fight against bigotry and homophobia and sexism. They are only there. The only reason they can do what they can do and they can say what they say is because they have support from all their friends. They have support from their parents who actually fought for these things when it was virtually impossible to do so. But they did it, and they didn't just get a bunch of hashtags out there. They actually got legislation passed, and they changed the system. They changed the system. That is the difference.
What have you just hashtag?
What have you achieved?
If we are not achieving much, then why are you guys panicking? Why are you guys so afraid?
I forgot what kind of fallacy that is.
You guys are so afraid of losing control, and that shows we're making a difference. Okay, while you keep congratulating yourself over a letter, we're actually making real differences. Okay, we are growing louder. And if this is all you can do in response, then be prepared to be replaced. What you call mainstream liberal. It's very interesting. You're like, oh, the liberals were the ones that were doing all of this. The main person that signed that letter, that everybody is highlighting and congratulating themselves for getting that person to sign the letter, was Noam Chomsky, and he was the person for decades to write about and tell people how these so-called liberals have actually manufactured consent, how they are the gatekeepers of what is acceptable narrative, of what people who gets to say what. These liberals were the actual so-called liberals were the actual gatekeepers. They were the actual people in control of cancellation. That was the true cancel culture. This is not cancel culture. This is the cancel culture being taken away from mainstream liberals.
The letter is not about. As I said, you're the sort of
read the manufactured consent by Noam Chomsky and see how much he's changed since when he wrote that letter.
He hasn't changed a bit. Okay, he's not the one who's changed. This conversation is not about that. This is not about his principles. Like I said, you are, the woke person, right? The sort of quote unquote woke person, and I am the more sort of conventional liberal over here, right? Who's talking the older person. With the experience. But in any case, we are aligned on the vast majority of things you want to achieve. You want to see bigotry gone. You want to see sexism gone. You want equity for Black people. You want civil liberties. You want gay rights. You want all of these things. Okay? Trans rights and everything. We both want the same things. You want free healthcare. You want single payer healthcare. We do too. Like, I live in Canada, so I know how amazing it is. I want that for all of my American friends and my relatives. I have 2 siblings who live there. I've got nephews and nieces who live there. I want that for them. I want Medicare for all of them. So I support that. The problem is not that. The problem is the tactics that you're using when you're trying to achieve it. And
go cry me a river.
The tactics that you were using at some point were easy to ignore. It was great. It was nice. It was activism. But then they became counterproductive. They started standing in the way of getting things done. Okay, and that's what became the problem. I'm talking about achievement. You're saying that you're doing it. You're changing the system from within. How are you doing it? Go ahead.
Let me tell you, the audience, what's happening here. Okay, Ali had rubbed some shoulders with people that are considered educated elite, and he just wants to be accepted in their club. He just enjoys having his blue check mark on Twitter and being cited in this prestigious article and having his book being cited and having respectable people include him in this social circles. And he's afraid that he just wants to be, he's so comfortable there, and he just wants these people to tap him on the back and be like, good boy, Ali, we could consider you, you're like elites, diet elites, you're one of us. And so it's within his best interest to not rock the boat that much and basically be like a good dog for them and go about, act like, yeah, women rights, yeah, Black Lives Matter, yeah, sure, Black Lives Matter, but no, don't go too radical. You should let's have civil discussions here. Let's not get too, aggressive here with our language, and people shouldn't lose their job. I mean, the letter itself. Okay, can you send me the letter, because it's very interesting. The last line of the letter. Send me the letter, because it shows that the entire letter is summarized in this last line, because these people are like, hey, let's not get.
The last line is, we need to preserve the possibility of good faith disagreement without dire professional consequences. If we won't defend the very thing on which our work depends, we shouldn't expect the public or the state to defend it for us.
Dire professional consequences without what? Having so this is what they want. This is like, hey, you could have your dissent, you could have your disagreement, but don't come for us. Don't let we are comfortable here. We don't want to have any real consequences. We don't want to have any real consequences to what we're saying. We are very much enjoy sitting here and looking at you on all the unwashed masses and drinking champagne and watching you fight with each other. And if we say something and you guys, if you can fight about it, but if you come after us, that's where we draw the line. That's where we draw the line. So your dissent has to be in this bubble that we have created for you, and you just stay there and fight each other. But know your place. Know your place. That's what this letter is about. And that's what you represent, Ali.
Yeah, so I when it comes to dire, most of the people who signed this letter, they have pretty secure jobs. Nobody's going to be canceling JK Rowling anytime soon. Nobody's going to be depriving Noam Chomsky of his legacy and his platform. Nobody's going to be unpublishing all of Margaret Atwood's books or Malcolm Gladwell's books or Salman Rushdie's books. I mean, these are all signatories to the letter.
Not yet. Not yet.
They won't.
That's our. Well, that will.
I know you think it's going to happen, and you guys are going to make it happen, but you haven't really made anything happen at all, right? You haven't. Like, what have you done?
I mean, this letter itself proves that you guys are afraid and that we're coming for you. This is you guys whining about our influence growing. So we must be making some difference.
So one of my friends, his name is Armin Navabi. I don't know if you know him. Like I know that you think that he's a total Nazi and a racist. For your whole crowd just thinks he's a complete abomination. He should have been canceled a long time ago. But in any case, so we disagree on those. So we agree, me and him agree that this is a serious problem. It's obviously a big problem. Shouldn't be allowed to get too big. But where we had a little bit of a disagreement, actually, we may not have as much of a disagreement as I think. I shouldn't speak for him. Obviously, he's not here to defend himself and to state his positions. But I think overall, one of the things that is encouraging to me recently, especially this year, is that we have found out that what you're doing and all of this sort of trying to cancel professors and trying to get this person fired for this or that person fired for that, not allowing some teachers to discuss certain things in classrooms and not allowing diversity debates and things like that, and all of these tactics are not really working. They're not really playing out. You had legislatively, like electorally, you haven't really gotten anywhere. You had a candidate in the Democratic primary, Bernie Sanders, who now even him, some of you think is a little bit too much for the mainstream, even though he was the radical at one time. These are people, he was supported by AOC and all the other sort of the squad congresswomen in Congress, the sort of left liberal ones, part of the whole progressive, more millennial left part of Congress. Now, this guy, right, he had rallies with loads and loads of people, right? But most of his support came from generally young white people, not enough to come and beat him in the primaries, right? Or to help him win in the primaries. Who won in the primaries? It was Joe Biden. Okay, who has spoken out against the kind of things that you're doing, the woke and just basically casting stones all the time, that you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, without providing any practicable solutions that are actionable legislatively? Who has called you out on that? Barack Obama. Who you also probably
your people
is a neocon. Yeah, I know. You probably think he's a neocon, even though he started his campaign. He started his political career, not his campaign, with the guy from the Weather Underground. Again, those guys are way more radical than you are, and he was friends with him. He started it in the guy's living room, Bill Ayers. So, these people, they've been there, they've done that, they've grown, they've matured, they went there, they know how to get things done. They went beyond what you guys are doing. It wasn't just about screaming in the streets and tweeting from your mom's basement. Okay, it was beyond that. And when some of you are doing it, you guys have the right ideas. You do have the right ideas. We agree on so many different things. But when it comes to tactics and getting things done in a democracy where people agree with you, you had to beat Joe Biden. You didn't. Okay, you had to. There's so many things that you had to do that you haven't done. And you're getting pushback, and you're getting deserved pushback. You didn't just not defeat Joe Biden. I mean, he trounced you. You're not getting the support of Black people whose causes you champion. You're not getting the support of most women whose causes you champion. You're not getting the support of most other minority groups, right? And you champion their causes all the time. The people who you support, a lot of times, they are people who tend to be more centrist, who tend to be more practical. They have much more at stake. They recognize Trump for the threat that he is. You minimize the threat that Trump is to the United States and to the rest of the world, by the way, you minimize it by just saying that, he's no different than the mainstream liberals, right? And that is something that most people see through. Go ahead.
All right. So first of all, it's very interesting how you guys move the standards, because the fact that Bernie even managed to get the level of support that he got was unimaginable, right? So the fact that he got this much support just a couple of decades ago, nobody would have thought that our ideas would have gotten such a huge platform. So this has already been a major win for us. You guys just are
ideas
changing.
Weren't new, but go ahead. The ideas weren't new, by the way. They weren't your ideas.
Our ideas. Hold on, let me speak. Our ideas are just getting louder and louder, right? Our ideas are just getting louder and louder, and we went from these ideas being fringe to now getting so close to such high positions of power. And you're like, but you didn't win the presidency. Yeah, so what? We already made so much progress, and we'll continue to make so much progress. And then you go out like, Biden and Obama are against you. No fucking shit. You're just describing the mainstream liberals trying to fight back against actual dissent. Your people are like, we should this letter, and you guys are saying like, we should allow dissent. We are the dissent, motherfuckers. Normalizing dissent is letting our voices be heard. This is what dissent looks like. Okay. So, and then you say like, women are against you. Most women, there are a lot of these people are against you. Yeah, because you guys have manufactured consent, because you guys have controlled the media. You guys control what narratives are acceptable and what information people have access to. That will change. That has already changed a lot. You're just looking at the majority numbers, but you're not looking at the trend. The trend is in our favor. The majority is not in our favor, but the trend is in our favor. So we will continue making the progress, and things will change. You say what we have done, we're slowly replacing your politician. As I said, we're replacing your journalist, we're replacing your media people, and we're also giving access to more voices to the masses through social media. Our voices have actually been canceled. This is what actual cancellation looks like. Our voices have actually been canceled for decades by powerful elites. And now you guys, now that we have a voice, you say, cancel culture. This is fucking bullshit. We had no outlets to. You're like, people are against you. Well, because we had no outlets to reach out to people. Now our voices are getting out there, and as soon as they got out there, they're making more change. They're changing people's opinions faster in a much shorter amount of time than ever imagined. And you are saying like, you guys are still weak and still not in control. Look at the level of change in people's opinions we have made with the very narrow level of access we have had to the masses. So as the crack keeps opening, our progress is going to become even faster and faster, right? You get like, hashtag. You hashtag. If it was just hashtag, why are people being removed from positions of authority when they don't deserve to be there? How are we doing that? Because we're actually changing these hashtags that you're describing is basically you're trying to dismiss social media is because it's the only outlet that we have right now. It was the only outlet that we have right now because everything else was controlled. And now we have been giving a small window to actually reach out to people. And that's why people like you dismiss social media, like, oh, your hashtag, oh, Twitter is nothing. Twitter is not real life. It's because the only access we have been given to the masses. And don't worry, it's not going to be, we're not just going to be on social media because we're coming for your other platforms as well. So if you think like social media is not real life and it doesn't matter, don't worry, because we will replace you in real life as well. We're just getting started.
Yeah, and you've been on the platforms for a very long time. Actually, people like Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman, NPR, all of this public radio. You guys have been on these platforms for a very long time. The media has always had all kinds of voices. You've had the sort of the conservative trucker radio with Rush Limbaugh. The conservative talk radio has been ruled by conservatives. You've had mainstream, TV networks that have been run essentially by sort of centrist liberals, in most cases. Then you've had some of these new things, right? And including the New York Times. You have a very, very good share of progressives there. This other place, New York Magazine. You've had a lot of progressives in sort of the woke progressives I'm talking about, the super sort of leftist ones, the ones that don't want to run editorials by people who disagree with them, like those people who just want their opinions in the paper and nothing else. So you've been there for a while. It's not that you're coming to replace any platform. There's no media monolith that it's all liberal, it's all conservative, it's all this, it's all that. It's not. Talk radio is largely conservative. Cable TV is sort of like a mixture. It's balanced. You've got all kinds of different options. You've got mainstream network TV that's sort of centrist, left of center, liberal, and then you have the internet and social media and Vox and all of these things that happen to be more the kind of things that you want. So it's a good mix of everything, and we like it that way. I like it.
I think I already made my point. Let's go to the Patreon or to the live chat.
We're going to go to the live chat in a second. I do want to respond to a couple of things that you said. You're saying that, okay, look at how much support we got. So I will give you that. And I think it's been very positive that Bernie Sanders, his candidacy, has brought a lot of people into the fold. He has moved the Democratic Party leftward, which was inevitably going to happen. One of the reasons when, say, Obamacare was passed in 2009, 2010, around that time, the idea was to not have the public option then so you could get it passed without a filibuster. And then later down the line, you are going to have a public option, and then you're eventually going to go to Medicare for all. All of the Democrats, the mainstream Democrats in the US, eventually want to get to single-payer healthcare. Right? It's a matter of what can be done now and what can be done later, what is incremental and what can get through. So that's one thing. Again, not a new idea, something that's always been embraced. It's just a matter of how to get it done. And yes, your woke crowd and your Bernie Sanders and that whole kind
of... What a dismissive term, by the way, woke crowd. What a dismissive term. What a dismissive, like...
I agree with you. I don't even like terms like regressive left and everything. You use them because it's something that people recognize, and I would rather use other terms. The second thing is this idea that, okay, the black people and the minorities that are not supporting it, they're still supporting it. It's because you've manufactured consent. Yes, like the black people are so gullible. The minorities are so gullible that they have just
what a straw man. Straw man.
Let me finish. Let me finish. They have just fallen for the manufactured consent propaganda.
Oh yeah, we're the true bigots.
The mainstream liberals, whereas you guys, right? You guys have been woke, but these minorities who went and voted for Biden and didn't come to your side, like they are somehow completely lost. There must be something. But it's okay. It's your job to save them and bring them to the light, and then they're going to come to it. Like, it is the most condescending, and outright bigoted thing that you could say. This is what I mean. You guys and the far right, are they? And so I want to say one more thing, Armin. Okay, I mean not Armin. Whoever you are, I don't know. Mohammed Netanyahu. That's your name, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're okay, sure.
Just whatever your thing is. I want to say one thing, and this is actually for the audience, and I'm serious about this. And this is one thing I really wanted to make sure I got to say in this podcast. You have conservatives, you have liberals, you have extremists on the conservative side, the far right. You have extremists on the liberal side, the far left. Not a fan of both sidesism. Okay, but the fact is that the far right extremes of the conservatives have taken over the entire conservative party. Okay, they are in the White House, right? They are in the Senate. They're everywhere. They've actually run for elections, won those positions, and now mainstream conservatives are rolling over for them. They're their lapdogs, like the Mitch McConnell Senate and everything. And this is, we're talking mainly about the U.S. because the election's coming up, and this is where most of this activity is happening, right? So the far right has taken over the overall mainstream conservative party. Okay, on the left, right, when it comes to liberals, the far left is still there. Okay, this is people like this character that I'm speaking to right now. Okay, they're still there. They're still doing their thing, but they're getting pushback. Their candidate has not won. Okay, Jeremy Corbyn has lost massively, worst defeat for Labour since 1935. Like Biden, who was everybody hated online, right, and didn't have a lot of people at his rallies, completely trounced Bernie Sanders, who had loads of people at his rallies, and who was absolutely adored on the internet. There are many things. You have people like Noam Chomsky and Margaret Atwood, pushing back against this whole far left thing. So there is still a conscience that is alive, that values open debate, that values open dissent, that is still alive among mainstream liberals. And by mainstream liberals, I don't mean conservative liberals. I don't mean non-progressive. They are just as progressive as anybody else, probably even more. These are people with records of getting things done. And these are the people who actually have the true liberal values. It's not on the mainstream conservatives, not the far right, and not the far left. It's these people, the Obama crowd. These people are still there. They're still pushing back. They're still winning votes. Bernie got a lot of influence, but tweets do not win elections. Votes win elections. You can tweet as much as you want to. You can rally as much as you want to. You can have all the placards and all of the signs and everything you want to on the street. You don't win until you vote. And the people who have the votes still, right, are the mainstream liberals, and that is really the only hope. And I'll close on that, and we can go to patrons.
Wait, no, I have to respond to that. By the way, when you say still have the vote, still being the key word here, okay?
Yeah.
So when you keep like these people like, oh, you guys are the actual racists. What a cheap and pathetic way to respond to our activism, right?
I don't think you're racist.
Hold on, let me answer, right? Mm-hmm. People like when we say there's manufactured consent, nobody is suggesting like, oh yeah, the minorities and the women are the only ones that are being brainwashed, and the white people are immune to it. But you obviously had to strawman what I'm saying, because this is what your crowd does every time we point to bigotry and homophobia and transphobia. Every time we point to that, instead of like actually acknowledging the real problems within both the left and the left-leaning people and the right-leaning people, it's like, no, you're the racist. This is a childish response. Like, oh no, we're not the racist. You're the racist. That's the level of discussion. Okay, great. You're saying that when we say manufactured consent, we're saying, oh, women are so they're so stupid, or minority people are so stupid that they're being duped by this manufactured consent. Nobody is saying that. Of course, anybody, no matter what color you are, no matter what gender you have or sexual orientation you have, when the entire masses, all of them, when you have limited access to information, and when there's an illusion of dissent, obviously nobody could expect you to actually be waking up to what's actually happening. This is not something that we're criticizing people for being brainwashed. We're only criticizing the system, not the people. And we never suggested that women or minorities are more susceptible to it than anyone else. So that's a ridiculous strawman by you. When you said when you keep mentioning Trump, this is what the liberals do, right? The liberals they want some level of dissent, but not too much, just to show that, oh yeah, don't worry, there's different opinions there. Oh, it's just the right-wing people that are not letting you guys speak. We allow you, but as long as within this framework, and to make sure that people do not step out of line when it comes to mainstream liberals and don't go too far. They have this boogeyman. Oh, look, Trump scary. Oh, you need us because if if we're not here, the alternative is Trump. This is how this mainstream liberals and right-wing people work with each other. They both have the same interest. They want them to remain relevant and be in power, and they just scare masses like, oh, if you go too radical with these lefties, you look at what you're going to get. So they just use each other to fearmonger their people, so that both sides like, yes, we need you, please protect us, so that they manage to continue sitting in their seat. And last thing, when you mentioned the so we have the record, we are actually the people that are doing the job, and you need hashtags don't do the things votes do. So I want to respond to that, by the way. First of all, our people, the so-called the people that you describe as radicals, we have a huge record of making a lot of changes, and we managed to make those changes without very limited resources that was allowed for us to have. That was decided. But it was decided by you guys to have. The people that you're saying have a record of getting things done. Yes, they have a fine record of bombing innocent civilians, including children. Great record, and they have managed to get a lot of things done with a lot of resources, with actual power. When we get things done, we get it with the very limited resources that wasn't given to us, that we actually came and took from you guys, and we took it from you guys because we did things that you describe as being radical, right? So last time when you said votes, not hashtags, don't worry. Right now we have hashtags. Tomorrow we have the votes as well. This is why you dismiss the hashtags. You mentioned it hashtags because, again, like I said, you want to dismiss the social media is because the only place where actual dissent is happening. Everywhere else, everything is controlled. But don't worry, it's not just going to be hashtags. We're coming for everything else.
Well, you know what? When you do, and I'll be aligned with you on a lot of the principles. I will be completely aligned with you.
We'll see.
In my case personally, and I'll speak for myself, I'll be aligned with you on Black Lives Matter. I'm going to be aligned with you on many of on gay rights. I'll be aligned with you on trans rights. I'll be aligned with you on all of these issues. But, okay, I'm not going to be aligned with you on some of these views about deplatforming. And another thing I want to say, and this is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll move on to patron questions, is that when you talk about radicals, when I say mainstream, I'm not excluding radicals. As I said, the radicals of yesterday are the mainstream of today. The only difference between you want to lump yourselves in, well, we're the radicals, we are like all the ones in the past who did it. No. The ones in the past who did it right now are the ones who signed that letter against you.
No.
Okay, the ones on the right who did it, the ones on in the past who did it, those radicals who are now in power and who got that power through radicalism by bringing in radical change actually achieved those things. You cannot take credit for that. I am the one who's telling you, right? I'm on, this is the side I'm on. I didn't personally do anything, but yes, that is the side I'm on. I'm on the side of those people who have a record of getting things done. They're no less radical. Nancy Pelosi and all these people, that as much as they're entrenched in the elite and the establishment and everything, these are they're all progressives. Joe Biden is running on the most progressive agenda ever in the history. A lot of that is thanks to your group. Yes. Okay, a lot of that is thanks to your group.
We forced you guys.
The difference between you and me is I am telling you, and I'm conceding.
Thank you for acknowledging our record.
Oh, I've been acknowledging you throughout. When it comes to principles, when it comes to what you want to achieve, I've told you that I'm aligned with you. The only thing I'm saying is the way you're doing it, at least the fringes of you guys, hopefully most of you are doing it right. The fringes, the way you're doing it, going about it is wrong. It's no different from what the far right and the right wing generally used to do for ages. It's sometimes bordering on McCarthyism, if not outright McCarthyism for the state. You haven't gotten that far, right? But it's bordering on that, right? And so that's the main thing. And so I disagree with you on the tactics. Completely disagree with you.
Let me just say something quick. The mainstream liberals are okay with the radicals of yesterday, but not with the radicals of today. Just like yesterday, they weren't okay with the radicals of their time. The only reason why they're okay with the radicals of yesterday is because the radicals of yesterday managed to make their narrative mainstream. So the reason why you say like, oh, I'm okay with them, because they managed to make their radical movements mainstream now, and now you're not okay with us. Well, this is history repeating itself. Our narrative today is seen as radical, but this is going to be tomorrow. We're going to force you guys to consider our narratives today as mainstream. And again, 10 years from now, you're going to be like, oh yeah, these people that used to be considered woke, they used to be considered radical, but now we stand with them. This is going to be, it's going to happen, and again. And all the achievements that you could consider like is your achievements, like, oh, Biden is the most progressive now. Yeah, that's because we are people who not used to be mainstream. We managed to corner you guys into a position that we're forced to make it mainstream. Yeah, we are not mainstream now. We will be mainstream tomorrow. And again, sure. you will say the same thing again. You will say like, oh yeah, these people used to be called radicals, but now it's mainstream, and everybody accepts that this is the right way to. And the people who weren't on our side are going to be humiliated as the people who stood up for bigotry, homophobia, transphobia, and sexism. So, okay. And I look forward to that.
Thank you, Mohammed Leibovitz, or whatever your name is. I appreciate it. I think that I like the fact that you're there. I like the fact that your voice is out there. I want to hear far-right narratives. I want to hear Marxist, pro-Marxist narratives. I want to hear all of that. I want this discussion to be robust, and I want it to be heard by all, and I want it to be argued in the public forum. So I think that that is a true sign of liberalism, the fact that we're having this conversation. And I think it's great. And I think that even if we disagree on the mainstream liberals and all of that, as long as we agree on the person in the White House, the person who actually has the power, which is not the mainstream liberals at this moment, as long as we agree on that, we have to do something about that, no matter how much we even hate each other, how much antipathy you have towards me. Right now, we're allies and we're good.
All right, let's move to the live chat.
Yes. Okay. Live chat. Okay, let's. Oh my God! Now I have to see if there's any questions here.
There's ask people, like, guys, if you have any questions, post them now, because we're not going to scroll back up.
Susanna mentioned a story that I had about that the teacher who got fired from the school. She corrected me, and she is absolutely right. So this was not an Afghan Canadian; he was an Iranian Canadian, and he was sharing a story of honor killings. And then what he did was he posted, when he was talking about it, he wrote, quote, "Fuck Islam, fuck honor killing, and fuck you if you believe that in any of these barbaric Stone Age ideologies." So he's an ex-Muslim Iranian, and he is an atheist, but he is a public or private school teacher. I can't tell, but he's a teacher at a school, right? And I think it is a private school. I can't recall, but. So he is a teacher at a school, and he was fired for it. And that's a really tough one for me, because even though I do agree with the sentiment, and I agree that he's in a position to speak out against what he sees as an oppressive system, I understand that if I was running a school and I had students from all kinds of different things and different religious and cultural backgrounds, and there was one teacher who had actually expressed himself this way, and it got out and everybody knew about it. I don't know I'd probably have to let him go. And I think most of us would have to in that situation, even if we disagree with him anyway. Uday is asking, just curious, does Armin hate Trump as much as Ali does? Again, for real, ignoring the act. For real Armin, come back.
Well, I think Trump, I don't know how you measure who hates him more. I don't know if you could describe it. I mean, I think he's a war criminal, so I think Ali and I agree with it almost on most things on Trump, but I think the main difference is that I don't spend so much time. I think a lot of people miss the point on why Trump is bad. Like, they keep language policing him rather than actually holding him accountable for, going at, making, for his crimes against civilians in Yemen, for making it easier for dictators around the world to not experience any pushback for their human rights violations, for in United States for challenging practices and institutions that made the United States a better place, for being the first president that has been a major challenge to freedom of expression, way more than cancel culture could ever be. And I think these are the main reasons why Trump is extremely dangerous. And especially the Supreme Court judges that he's electing, that is one of the major sources of damage. And I think like all these, but when I watch like late night comedians and other people criticizing Trump, they actually make it seem like they're being unfair to him, because when you like, they take him out, like if right wing people were only exposed to most of the attacks on Trump, it would seem like they're just being unfair, right? Like if I wasn't actually looking at how bad Trump is, and I was just relying on social media and late night comedians, I would think like, well, you guys are taking him out of context. I watched the full video. You guys edited this video in a way to make him more ridiculous. And I keep saying that, like, you guys don't need to do this. He's actually a bad president. You guys don't need to take him out of context, and you guys don't need to edit the videos to make him more silly than he actually is. You don't need that. You already have a lot to work with, because he's horrible. Why do you have to do, because why are you doing this? There's legit things to go after him for.
Yeah, have you seen Sarah? Sarah Cooper, the comedian who basically just makes videos of her lip syncing exactly what he said, and it's hilarious. I mean, there's
I like that. That's funny. No,
yeah,
that's funny. That's funny. But I'm talking about late night comedians or other people on social media that actually make it, like he's saying something that when they just cut the clip and they, like, when I listen to it, like on on late night comedians, they're like, oh my god, that was absolutely ridiculous. And then I look at the longer video of what he said. I'm like, okay, that was not that ridiculous what he said if you watch the full video, okay? And I'm like, wow, you're actually making him look good by attacking him on things that he doesn't deserve to be attacked on. But there's already shitload of things mountains of real things that you could go after him for.
And that hurts more than it helps.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you. So Uday, what you're saying is, Armin. Yeah, we both have we both, and I think we're going to do an episode on this. Like we say it's for different reasons, but I have always been opposed to religion. I've always been opposed to Islam. That was like the main thing. I am actually pretty much anytime I see things like that, I am opposed to them. I'm opposed to Trump for the same reasons. When he tweets things and he's got this cult-like following that is always interpreting his tweets and saying what he really meant, and they've actually said, don't take it literally, or don't take it seriously, don't take it literally. It's the same stuff that the Islamic apologists say. When he talks about restricting free speech and the press is the enemy of the people, and that protest and taking a knee and all of that, that reminds me of blasphemy laws. When he talks about all of the untruths, the bullshit about injecting UV light and injecting disinfectant and being anti-vaxxer and everything, that's anti-science, that's anti-critical thinking, it's anti-truth. His birtherism, his refusal to apologize for what he did with the Central Park Five, who were later exonerated, and he was calling for their death penalty. He took out full pages in the New York Times to say it. There's all of these things. I mean, I don't even want to go ahead and name them all. It is essentially the same reasons. The reasons that I hate religion, the reasons I despise Islam and religion and Christianity, all of these things is the exact same thing. The problem is that when it happens in places where I grew up, I know that those places have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of work to do. And when it's over there, I despise it enough. But when it's happening in a place where that is supposed to be the beacon of everything against that's supposed to be the culmination of Enlightenment values, when the same things happen, right? It's even more of a dire thing, because then, what do you have? What do you have after that? Mm-hmm. So for me, the reason that I despise it, and I think that he is literally the biggest international emergency in the world right now that needs to be gotten rid of, it's because of that. It's no different from the reasons that I oppose religion, oppose Islam. Anwar Koka, this is my friend from medical school, Anwar Koka. Hey, Anwar, what's up? as a Patreon member, let me ask, why are you guys so hung up on labels and stereotyping?
I mean, stereotyping I'm against, but labels I'm not against. Labels are extremely useful. I don't know why people have a thing against labels, but stereotyping I'm against. When did we stereotype?
Yeah. I don't think so. Anwar, for when you're talking, I agree with Armin. In some cases, you do need labels. When you're having general conversations about things, you can't. When you're talking about statistics, I mean that's generalizing. When you're talking about data, to some extent, at some level, that is going to be generalizing. You're going to have to categorize, whatever variables you're discussing into different classes, different categories, in order so that you can actually process the information. You can get a good read, a temperature on what's going on. So labels are important. I do hear what you're saying about the whole woke thing, that, when you do the woke, now if I go, different people would use it, like, the way they use snowflake and the way they use SJW, the way they say Karen. I like it because I think it's really funny. I think it's entertaining, but I don't think it should be a serious thing, because, I can come out and I can say anything. Maybe at some point, what I just said about Trump, someone would be like, oh, you got Trump derangement syndrome, you're woke, you're this, you're that. They start misapplying these things. They start calling Majid Nawaz regressive left, even though he coined the term, and it was about something completely different. So I don't think that these terms, I believe that they have very limited they're not super, super helpful all the time, but it's a good way to categorize things sometimes. This is a question for me from Mars. Hey, Mars. Excuse me. Have you changed your stance on if you believe the woke are a fringe or mainstream? They have a lot of social power. The whiteness flyers on the Smithsonian were insane. They were those whiteness flowers and the flyers, and they were also retracted, and they were written by, again, not really black people. It wasn't black people who wrote them. It was the book that it came from. I think it was Judith Katz. I can't remember the name of the author exactly, but she was a white author who had written a book like White Fragility. So
can you describe what these whiteness flyers are?
Yeah, there were these flyers that identified white culture as, when they talk about the scientific method, individual ruggedness, the nuclear family, as these are somehow elements of white culture, right? And this is something that obviously was written by, this is information that was written by a white woman, and there were a lot of black people that thought it was ridiculous as well, and they thought it was actually racist. So yeah, I think that I think that woke are between fringe and mainstream. I think they're beyond fringe. And again, I don't have a problem with the woke in terms of it's, you saw this conversation where Armin's doing the whole devil's advocate thing. When it comes to a lot of the principles, we're aligned. We're all fighting for the same kind of thing. When it comes to the kind of tactics that they use, that's really where I differ with them. I differ with them on a lot of principles too, but I differ with them on the tactics. But do I think they're fringe or mainstream? I think combined with the with all of the things that we've seen this year, with what happened with the primary election in the U.S., what's happening with the national election right now, what happened with the Corbyn defeat, what happened with the Tara Reade accusation, where they suddenly went from the believe all women to take all of the accusations seriously. Even the sort of all the liberals who weren't entertaining due process before and got rid of Al Franken, for instance, they are now embracing due process, and they're correcting it. And I think that makes the whole Me Too movement even stronger. So I think that the correction is going on, and I think it's helpful. And you've got the Harper's letter, of course. So I think it is a phenomenon that'll go on its way out. Excuse me. One really important thing, though, is I think that the far left and the woke, that opposition is legitimized when you have Trump in power. When you have the far right and authority, and
I agree,
authoritarian system there, that is going to empower the woke more. The day Trump got elected, all of the regressive leftists that we've been fighting against became mainstream, right? And they became accepted. And even I felt sometimes, I was like, okay, well, are we all on the same side now? And it was a really, really tough thing. And I don't like that. I didn't like it, and I thought it's been really harmful. So one of the things that we want to do, if we want to fight the woke phenomenon, there are some people going over the Trump side because they want to fight the woke. No, if you go to the Trump side, you're going to empower the woke. That's why they are so powerful right now, the way that they are.
Actually, can I say I agree with what you just said so much, because I'm hoping, this is not a prediction, this is just hoping, okay? Because I don't want to predict something and then people are like, oh, you were wrong. I'm hoping that if Trump loses the election, this is going to take the wind out of the sail from for a lot of the woke movement.
Yeah, and it's always happened this way. Anytime you have a sort of an extremist left or extremist right side in power, I mean, it legitimizes the extreme on the other side as the opposition. You know, when you've had secular dictatorships in the Middle East, who rises up in the vacuum? When Mubarak comes down, Muslim Brotherhood gets elected, right? It's like that everywhere. And that's why it's not a matter. I don't necessarily have a problem with certain extremes. All revolutions start off with extremists, as you said, or your woke alt character said. But it's when you're talking about giving somebody political power, you have to be very cognizant of these dynamics. New Sun Terror Rising. America Politique is the worst. Conservatives and, quote, liberals both see the world through racial lenses, which means they make horrific generalizations like black/white culture is. Sorry, I can't see the.
Oh, wait.
Is there another comment?
Is that the rest? I don't know.
Yeah, well, Americans need to stop using white, black, etc. as if they mean anything. White culture is meaningless when it includes Bosniaks and Spaniards. Yeah, I completely agree with this. And and we're going to get him on this podcast too. Like this, my friend Habib Fani, right? He's a physician. He was an undocumented worker. He was an illegal immigrant, came to the U.S. Now he's a U.S. physician licensed, and he's working on the West Coast. He was a Muslim, and now he's an atheist. He was African black, and then he came here and he found out, he talked about some of the differences that he had with American blacks and some of the tensions between the black people in the U.S. Who have had this legacy of slavery versus black people who grew up in Africa, who grew up where black people were the majority. They may not have seen, they've had a completely different experience. So it's a really interesting conversation. I had him on my personal podcast called Professional Novice. Excuse me, sorry, I'm coughing. And you guys should really listen to it, because that's where we kind of get rid of this idea of that there is a white culture or a black culture or anything like that.
Okay. Read this one.
Armin, this one's for you. Okay. Who has been actually canceled and terminated that you disagreed with?
Oh. Who has been? Well, Milo. I mean, a lot of them. But hold on. A lot of the people.
Milo, does he have a Twitter account? Let me look him up. What's his Twitter?
No, he's been canceled. He's removed from.
Oh, okay. No idea.
Yeah, David Duke. I'm against him. He's been canceled. I mean, all the far right people who've been canceled, I'm against their views. I don't think they should be canceled, but I'm against all of their views. Yeah, I mean, most of the people who have been canceled, I'm against their views. So I don't know what you mean.
There's a question, a really good one.
But I've also been canceled. Go on, sorry.
Yeah. This is a really good question at 11:28 p.m. from Antonia Desormeaux. I hope I'm pronouncing it somewhat correctly. 11:28. Antonia.
I can't. Don't go back. Yeah, okay. Just read it. I don't know.
I'll read it. It says, I would love to ask, what about people changing? Do you think people can change their opinion for the better? Because canceling doesn't consider the possibility.
Yeah, of course. I mean, isn't that why we do our activism? Isn't that the entire point?
Yeah, I have something kind of important to say about this. Is, when they say, well, you're going to get rid of the Confederate statues, but what about Christopher Columbus and what about George Washington and all these? And what
does that got to do with the question? The question is about
people historically who did bad things.
Oh, right? Sorry. Read the question again. Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
It says, I would love to ask, what about people changing? Do you think people can change their opinion for the better? Because canceling.
But what's that got to do with the?
It does, because a lot of what's happening here is that they're looking at people who did things in the past, okay, like what Bill Clinton did in the 90s, and then they're painting him as homophobic. So, for instance, Bill Clinton passed Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the 1990s, right, where you wouldn't be asked if you were gay in the military, and you can't tell if you're gay. You can't tell anybody. And the reason for that was to allow gay people to serve in the military. Like nobody's allowed to ask you who you are. At that time, that worked. It was a pro-gay thing. Now it's an anti. Why can't you tell anybody? Why can't you come out? Why can't you be who you are? So you can't look at things then from the history of now. And the same thing goes with these. What I do is I do a simple exercise. Take yourself back in a time machine to that time and ask yourself, would you be doing those things? If you go back to the time of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and you're white, would you be sympathetic to slave owners? Would you have slave owner friends? Would you be voting for people who own slaves? Yes, you would. The vast, vast majority of you would. Okay? In that case, right, you can. I don't think that we can call them out. If you go back to the 1950s, we had Steven Pinker on the show actually 2 years ago today. Remember, it was July 24th, and so when he came on, he told us about.
And if you were wealthy, you probably would own some slaves.
Yeah, you would. Now, Steven Pinker had said, like on this show, he said that in Norway, I think it was Norway, one of the Scandinavian countries, or maybe it was all of Scandinavia, they found out that the people who were homophobic in the 60s, okay, the people who did not want gay people as their neighbors in the 50s, the percentage of Scandinavians who did not want gay people as their neighbors is higher than the number of Muslims today who say that. Okay, that shows you how people change, how entire societies change. So yeah, this aspect of cancel culture, of going back and finding out what someone did in the 70s or 80s when things were completely different. I always give that racist uncle at the Thanksgiving table, I give them a pass if they're like 80 years old or 70 years old and have certain attitudes, and they can't get down with trans rights, and it took them like 20 years to become okay with gay rights. I'm not going to cancel them. Like, okay, you just got to one thing. It's all right. It'll take you some time. I'm
going to address this next question by Will Philly.
Mm-hmm.
Will Philly. I don't know. Will. The question is, go read it.
Sorry, I don't know who's reading. Okay, he's saying, are there people you think? Are there people you think should be canceled?
Well, here's the thing, though. Okay, so canceled means different things. It depends on the platform, right? If you're talking about public, I think there's different lines that I support by different places, right? When we're talking about the government getting involved, the line should be outright specific call for violence or any form of con, right? So either again, let me put the different categories, right? Government, platforms where they have become close to public, resembling public spaces, and platforms that are not resembling public spaces, right? So government, which controls public spaces, I think that should be the most accepting area, which in public spaces, I think the limitation should be, again, call out for violence or, cons. For example, if somebody says, go kill Armin, that should not be allowed. Or if somebody says, this will cure cancer, and it doesn't, those should be the only limitation. Next area where I think when we talked about platforms where they have become close to public areas like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, right now there's no laws limiting what they can do with their platform because they're private companies. But given that it made sense for us to have free speech laws, because that's where most of the conversations were happening in public areas, and we wanted to limit the influence of government or what people get to say, I think it makes sense now to have something similar for platforms that, even though they're run by private companies, conversations are happening there so much that they're becoming close to a public area. It makes sense for us to have like something that limits the power and the authority of these private organizations over what we get to say. And the limitations, I think, should be close to what we allow, what the limitations we accept for public areas. But any other platform, I think cancellation is completely justified based on who owns the platform. Like, you can't go to a church and start yelling at people that their God is fake, if they want to kick you out of their church because you're doing that, that should be allowed. You can't just like open the door of someone's house and start reading the Communist Manifesto to the children while they're having dinner and be like, what happened to my free speech, right?
I would love to. That's a great idea. We should do that next time the pandemic is over. Let's go to door and start reading the Communist Manifesto to people's children.
No, just sit at the dinner table and start reading it to the family, and they should just sit there. They should sit there and take it from you, right?
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to platforms that are smaller and they're not even remotely close to public area, I think any form of cancellation is justified by the owners of that platform.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it gets into complicated questions. This we should have. We can talk about. We have talked about this actually in the past. Is whether the large platforms are monopolies or not. Whether they fit the legal definition of a monopoly or not. There's so many different aspects that come to it. Armin, I have a question for you. Just moving away from these, specifically for you, is it kind of a tough question, but deplatforming, like I used to think that, okay, this isn't going to work. It's going to make these people more powerful, but I got to admit it works really well. Okay.
It works with the individual, but not with. I think it works with the individual, but not with the movement. So deplatforming really does destroy an activist voice. Like it has proven to completely turn them into nothing, like somebody that we don't hear from ever again. It doesn't make them louder if it's done across everywhere, right? If you, for example, if they do what they did to me, like, oh, you just, like, for example, I was removed as a speaker at the university. If it's just one-off here and there, it actually helps the activists because it brings a lot more attention to them. But if it's done everywhere, like, oh, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, just remove this person from everywhere, then it's very effective at completely removing that specific activist. But I don't know how effective it is when it comes to the movement as a whole.
Yeah. Susanna is saying, never say you know the last word about any human heart. It's a quote from Henry James. Okay. Okay, next from Frank Sinister. What is the benefit in addressing historical/social disadvantages on the basis of groups rather than individuals? I think that there is a lot of benefit when there are groups that have been disenfranchised historically. If people are kind of going around and taking slaves based on somebody who has just a high school education, has never been to college, or is a high school dropout, right? Then you're going to get a diverse group of people who are going to be taking the slaves. Then you can maybe talk about, even that is a kind of a group collective. But if you are targeting, if there are disadvantages that are actually based on immutable identities of groups of people, then you have to address them for what they are. Otherwise, you're being disingenuous. Now, where the individuals come in is that within those communities, you are going to have different individuals with a diversity of views, and you also have to look at that. And I think that that's one thing we talk about a lot when it comes to ex-Muslims, like secular people from the Muslim world. As a group, they are being killed. As a group, that they are being threatened, and their livelihoods are being made hell by everyone from their parents to their governments. But as individuals, they also have the diverse group of views. But when you're talking about, it depends on the scale that you want to address it. Right. If you're looking at giving them asylum, then you have to go individual by individual and find out what their individual stories are, who's more a threat, who's not, who's living where, what kind of threat are they under. And based on that, you're going to decide their case. If you are looking at just overall, if you're running a movement to try and get them rights and fight against, say, blasphemy laws, you have to look at them as a group, because that's the basis of how they're being targeted. Armin,
right, so
to that?
Yeah, let's answer this question, and then I have to go because I'm starving. But I'm gonna answer this as well.
Just say you're hungry, Armin. This is actually very triggering to people who are actually going through starvation in the world.
Shut up.
That okay, itself, so by the way, is go ahead.
Oh my God! Okay. So I think there's a right way and the wrong way to do this, right? Historical and social disadvantages cannot be ignored because they don't just end even after you correct for them, right? So let's say, for example, you were going through slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, all of that, and now all of that is gone. And you were like, well, we don't have laws like that anymore, so get over it. That doesn't make sense, because if you start with a disadvantage, that disadvantage will continue through generations, right? We do have generational poverty. Like everybody might, even if everybody was playing by the same rule today, if other people had a head start before you, obviously they're going to be way ahead of you. I mean, generational poverty, like, there is a correlation between your ancestors, your parents' wealth and your wealth. I mean, I do agree that, I mean, you could keep giving me examples of people that started with no wealth and now they're wealthy. Those are just anecdotal evidence. The number one indicator of how wealthy you are is your parents' wealth. It's not just a correlation; it's also a causation. Right, so you can't deny that generational poverty is the main thing. You can't be like, oh well, if you work hard enough, you're going to be outdo that. No, that is still and is the number one main indicator of how much you're going to be succeeding in life. Your parents as well. So, and this generational poverty is not just going to erase itself after not one generation, 2 generations, not even after 10 generations. We're not 10 generations away from slavery. We're not even 3 generations away from slavery. Obviously, that's going to have a continued effect on people today, right? So you can't ignore that history, and no, people can get over it. You do need to acknowledge that. That's the right way to acknowledge the impact of history. The wrong way to acknowledge the impact of history is to switch from talking about generational poverty to talking about generational trauma, as if you are actually today experiencing the whip of the slave owners on your back, and that you calling out collectively holding white people today accountable for the crimes of their ancestors. That is the wrong way to talk about historical disadvantages and social disadvantages.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm in. That's good. So you got to go now?
I have to go soon, but let's just read some positive messages. Suzanne is saying, I love you, boys. Thank you.
Oh, we love you too.
Jim is saying, Armin better go help with the dishes, or he is a misogynist and deserves to be canceled. No, I will not help at all with the dishes. Even after this is done, I'm just going to sit back and wait for my food to be cooked and all the dishes to be cleaned after I'm finished eating, and the house to be cleaned for me as well. Thank you very much. Frank is saying, well, then you should solve generational poverty and not just white people's generational poverty. I mean, well, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Addressing generational poverty as a whole will help Black people more than white people. And you don't need to focus on Black people to be able to adjust for that bias if you're just focusing on generational poverty as a whole. I completely agree with that. Yeah. Okay, but the thing is that obviously the Black community the generational poverty is not the only thing that the Black community is dealing with. When it comes to anything poverty related, you don't need to focus on Black people. But when it comes to discrimination and other forms of bias that is not coming from poverty, then in those instances you might have to focus on the Black community.
Can I say one thing really quick, because this is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, when they say, well, you should focus on just everything instead of, it also works the other way around, right? So who is bringing attention to police brutality? Police brutality, by the way, is something that does affect Black people and white people both. In fact, more white people die as a number because of police brutality than Black people. Okay, systemic racism is different. Obviously, that affects Black people more, but police brutality affects them. Who's leading the fight against the police brutality? The Black people generally.
Okay, let's start. That's another topic, and I don't.
I'm giving an example. Let me finish. So it's not whether you're with BLM or not, right? It's they're doing it. So if you solve it for them, that benefits everybody. So that's a flip side. If you want to address generational poverty and you find the group that is most affected by it and you focus on them, that is going to help white people generational poverty as well.
No, Ali, because that will backfire. That will cause,
it doesn't, or that's not how it happens in practice. This has been done for a very long time. It helps everybody.
Okay, Ali, if you want to focus, if Black people are being getting more affected by generational poverty, addressing generational poverty is going to help them more. That helps more because that's a colorblind policy. Having more colorblind policies helps not cause more reverse, side effects and people thinking like they're being like. Imagine if then you're going to have a lot of examples of white people also wanting to apply. Then you want a lot of white people to also apply for these programs, and you're like telling them, well, no, we're only addressing Black people. That's going to cause a lot of hatred and a lot of misfiring and a lot of examples of white people feeling that they're being discriminated against. I think you should target, given that Black people are being, I think it's more effective and more if you just focus on poverty as a whole. And if Black people, and I'm not saying if, as it's not true, given that Black people are suffering from poverty more, you're already targeting them more without even trying. The area, and then you're not going to be also accused of racism against white people. The only areas that you need to focus on Black people instead of like solving something as a whole is when Black people are being targeted because they're Black people, and there are many examples of that, and only in those situations you need to focus on only Black people, right?
I think the colorblind policy thing is a problem. We're going to disagree on that. We're going to talk about
that's okay. Yeah, I'm on Martin Luther King's side with this. Here's the thing. I'm going to change. I'm going to change my mind on something. I said people shouldn't. I didn't think most people shouldn't be canceled unless they're calling out for violence. I changed my mind because Mars just said, Armin, get a Mac, PC suck. I think other than people who are calling out for outright violence, anybody that suggests Macs over PC, they should all be canceled. That's the only exception I make. Okay?
Except for me.
No, you you deserve to be canceled. If you are a Mac over PC guy, you deserve to be canceled. Around the only two people who are doing spreading con artists, people who call for violence, and people who think Macs are better than PC. Those are the only three groups of people that should be canceled.
Armin, is fear of being canceled. Do you fear being canceled, Armin?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, I do. I'm afraid of losing our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. So yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to lose this podcast. So yeah, we do take it for granted a lot, and this is one of the problems. And we've had friends, people we know, like Hamid Abdul Samad. He lost his YouTube channel. He eventually got it back. And we have gotten our Twitter account back. We have been, sort of inactivated and things like that from time to time. We've been demonetized, and it sucks. And it is a problem. This whole thing. This is why I have such a huge problem with it, and why I'm such a big supporter of the Harper's letter.
All right, I'm gonna go now.
Everybody, be best.
Thank you.
Be best. Armin, be best.
Sure.
Hashtag be best. You know about the Be Best campaign?
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
Ali hates Twitter hashtags, even though he uses them.
I love Twitter. I love Twitter. What are you talking? I'm the only one.
He dismissed social media. Okay.
I have to block so and so, or no, I have to take a break from Twitter for a month. Sorry, guys, I'll come back. It's really affecting my emotions. I love it. It's entertainment for me. It's fun. You go back to your real life between tweets. It's great.
Oh, by the way, Chopin is reminding everybody to like and subscribe because I suck at doing this. Yeah, thank you, Chopin, for reminding me. Like and subscribe. Go to our Facebook page, YouTube channel. Follow us everywhere. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not subscribed, what the fuck are you doing? If you are subscribed and you haven't hit the bell button, then what the fuck are you doing? I would like to say I love you all by ending this, but no, I only like the people here that have subscribed to our YouTube channel and also have hit the bell button. If you only subscribe to our YouTube channel and haven't hit the bell button, then I do not love you at all. You could go to hell for all I care. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's it. So hit the subscribe and hit the bell button. And also, Susanna suggesting become a patron. I don't make that a requirement for loving you guys, but yes, please become and do not become a patron if you are struggling financially. Do not become a patron. Please, you could support us by sharing the video. I don't even know why you wouldn't think of supporting us financially if you're in between jobs. If Corona has hit you, is making you not, your income is lower than before. If it's even a tiny bit difficult, do not support us. But if you're not going to miss $5 a month, if it's nothing to you, please consider supporting
$1 a month.
Yeah, $1 a month. Link in the description. Support our show, please.
And
Thank you.
yeah, and so Armin, you're not only going to be you're not just not like Max, right? You have to be like actively anti-Mac. That's an important thing.
I am. I agree. I agree with that. Okay.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Be best.